Welcome to Washington in Focus Daily. It is Friday, July 17th, 2026. I'm Carlene Johnson, the Center Square Washington's state government reporter. And in today's episode, plenty of interest in those comments we got yesterday from former Governor Gary Locke, sharply critical of his own party's budgeting, and some specific questions we were able to get in about the income tax. Now, we shared some of that with you yesterday. I want to expand on that in today's episode. So we'll share more of that. And also, we caught up with Kelly Chambers, former Republican state representative here in Washington, who was tapped earlier this year by the Trump administration to be the regional administrator for the Small Business Administration. She attended that same Association of Washington Business conference that Gary Locke attended on Thursday. So we got some comments from her. Very interesting since she represents both Washington and Idaho. Her take on the stark contrast for business climate between Idaho and Washington. Then major concerns being raised by the King County Correctional Officers Guild. Turns out that tablets inmates have in the King County jail that they were given during COVID, they still have those, and it probably makes a lot of sense in many regards. They can use those to meet with their legal team, they can use them for educational purposes, entertainment. Some of the inmates, though, were using those tablets to craft shanks, literally destroying them intentionally and using the parts that they pick up off the ground to make shanks and threaten correctional guards. So it's pretty shocking what's happening. And it turns out after they intentionally destroy some of those tablets, they just get another one. So I had a conversation with the Corrections Guild president. We'll share that exclusive interview with you. And then finally, World Cup is almost over. The final match to be played on Sunday in New York between Argentina and Spain. Seattle had 6 games, of course, as one of the 16 host cities. And there's certainly a financial benefit from that. And we're starting to get some of the data points. Didn't pan out as well as what FIFA promised for some of the hotel operators in the Seattle area. My colleague Randy Diamond has some of that for you. Also, some reaction from the Downtown Seattle Association president to what he sees as a real benefit, especially for the future, from what people that visited the city. Apparently, a lot of really good feedback coming in. All right, let's dive into today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily. So, former Washington Governor Gary Locke, a Democrat, he had some harsh words on Thursday for his own party when he took part in a discussion on stage. He was up there along with Marty Brown, former OFM director. Both of them, served under Democratic administrations. Of course, Governor Gary Locke himself a Democrat, but Marty Brown served under both Locke's administration and under Gregoire's administration. And this was pretty interesting to hear Governor Locke be very critical of majority Democrats. Now, you may recall if you've lived in Washington any length of time, when Governor Locke's term, 2 terms, 1997 up through 2005, he then created what he called priorities of government. That was during 2002, his second term. So the POG, priorities of government, basically, he went back to agency heads and said, I want you to get very real about, how we can maybe streamline things. One agency and another state agency, might be replicating it. That maybe we can, cross promote and potentially lay off some folks in state agencies and really get a lot more serious about budget priorities. So he made that a real part of his administration, and it was successful. They were able to budget within means. So AWB's president on stage, when Governor Locke was up there yesterday, he said, What advice might you have for current budget writers?" Majority Democrats, of course, in Olympia control both the House and the Senate by large majorities, and they really do completely control how those budgets end up being ultimately crafted. Republicans, try as they will, don't have a lot of control over what ultimately ends up getting passed. So this was Chris Johnson, who is, again, the president for AWB, asking Governor Locke, how might you encourage current budget writers to embrace some of your POG approach? This was former Governor Locke's response on stage.
Quite frankly, I have great concerns about the budgeting process in Olympia right now, and it's happening throughout all local governments. Rachel talked about it. You cannot take one-time money and commit it to permanent programming, because when that one-time money goes away, how are you going to continue that program? And then you create all this dissatisfaction and disappointment among the interest groups. So do you then raise revenues, whether it's taxes or revenues? Are you going to be able to cut other programs? Also, if you borrow money, where will you find the money? If you borrow money to pay for a program, where will you find the money to replenish or repay that fund? And then where are you going to find the money then to continue the program for which you borrowed that money? I think that the legislature has passed all these revenue programs, and some of it I support, but they still have a budget deficit. And they've already promised that all this new money is going to be spent for expansion of programs, and yet it looks like they're going to have to use this new money just to shore up existing programs. And so pretty soon, the voters are going to lose faith with policymakers and our leaders. I mean, we have these referendums or initiatives that are approved by the voters. We say it's going to be used for a certain type of program, and then 2 or 3 years later, they rob that program and use the money for something else. So pretty soon people are going to say, wait a second, I can't trust those folks, whether it's local government, state government, or whomever. We're voting for these things, we're approving these things, but then it becomes a bait and switch. And so pretty soon in the future, when we really have a really important program, will the voters be there to support it?
Now, as I shared with you in yesterday's episode of Washington in Focus Daily, I was able to catch up with Governor Locke right after he got off stage and ask him, further press him about some of the budgeting. And he again reiterated that he feels that, the budgeting is really out of control in Olympia right now, and that they're not, even though they're taking in record revenue, they're continuing to, promise things that are well outside what they know is going to be coming in based on economic revenue forecasts that we're getting. I asked him specifically about the income tax as well, and he didn't come out and blatantly say I'm opposed to the income tax, or he did not also endorse the income tax repeal initiative that qualified for the November ballot just this week. But he was very critical of his party, and he is the second Democratic governor to come out and basically blast his own party over how they're budgeting. You may recall it was former Governor Gregoire who recently came out at another Association of Washington business event. It was their spring summit back in early May that former Governor Gregoire said this.
I left office with a budget of $33 billion, and the budget today is $80 billion. I think that's a little bit too much of a growth. And yet, how we find ourselves at the end of every legislative session now is in the hole and projected to be in the hole. I would suggest to you, we don't really have an income problem, we have a spending problem. And we're answering it by stacking one more tax, one more rule, one more regulation. And the one thing that the business community doesn't need is that lack of predictability. That's how businesses grow. That's how they thrive. That's not healthy for our business community at all. As I look, unfortunately, last year at the composition of the Economic Development Committee and the House and the Senate, the one in the House was hard to find. The one in the Senate didn't exist. I asked, when did that happen? Where did the Economic Development Committee go in our state? And they heard, and they created one. Why do I think those are so important? To educate regarding the consequences of the taxes. For example, sales tax on services, anti-big business. Who was hurt? Small business. didn't understand it, didn't know it, didn't have anybody in the caucus who could explain it, nor was there a committee in which they could really begin to see the consequences of that action.
So Gregoire served as Washington's governor for, again, 2 terms, like her predecessor, Governor Locke, from 2005 up to 2013. Now, also in attendance at yesterday's AWB event, which was at the Hilton at SeaTac, was former State Representative Kelly Chambers. She's now part of the Trump administration. She was tapped earlier this year to be a regional administrator for the Small Business Administration, representing both Washington and Idaho. And I asked her specifically about that. We spoke just ahead of the conference beginning on Thursday morning. And she's very concerned seeing a stark contrast in business climate and the approach to business between Washington and Idaho. And so these were some of her comments just ahead of the conference yesterday, specifically addressing concerns about how Olympia is or is not responding.
I oversee Washington and Idaho, so you got two states next door to each other. That there's really some contrast there with how those states are approaching their business climates. And I think that lawmakers in Olympia are not getting the message. We do have companies leaving. We do have record amounts of office space available in the city of Seattle, and there are real impacts for that. That means less jobs. It's a cost shift on the taxes to the residential side. So we really do need lawmakers to see that companies are choosing to leave. But there's a frustration as well because we have businesses that are place bound and they can't leave. They may be, you can't pick up your territory or your zip codes that you own, or we have one company that has surveyed their employees and they would lose 90% of their employees if they relocated out of Washington. So, companies are in a tough position of wanting lawmakers to understand, hey, we love Washington, we want to stay here, but we need to have an economic environment that allows us to grow. And there's many small businesses that are looking to be that next Amazon, that next Microsoft, and they need policies here in Washington that allow them to do that and don't prevent them from having that growth.
Next week, I intend to share more from that AWB summit as it was very informative. There were real estate groups there, a lot of business executives talking about expanding outside of the state of Washington while still, keeping their headquarters here, intending to fight to the end. Many of them intent on seeing the income tax recently passed and adopted into law repealed. And again, voters are going to have that option on the November ballot because of the recent certification of the income tax repeal. That's I 645. You'll be seeing that on the November ballot. Now, let's get into what's happening inside King County Jail, at King County Correctional Facilities, because this may come as a surprise to you. It has not been widely reported, but when I saw this pop into my inbox late in the day on Thursday, I immediately reached out to the president of the King County Correction Officers Guild because this is concerning and it should be an alarming increase in inmate made weapons being recovered inside the jail. And these are not, insignificant little devices. These are deadly weapons capable of serious harm, if not death, to our those who work inside the jail, the guards, the those maybe coming in for medical appointments, that kind of a thing. They're making these homemade shanks out of tablets. You may recall back during COVID, inmates were issued these electronic devices, these tablets, because they were on lockdown for long periods of time, right? Not even able to see their, lawyers in person. So a lot of them were issued these tablets so then they could have maybe, medical appointments, virtual visits with doctors. They could have virtual visits with their legal team. They can have them as well for entertainment, watch movies, listen to music, maybe read books, educational reasons. So lots of good reasons to have these inmate issued laptops or devices, tablets, but they've continued to have access to them. Well, they've figured out that if you smash them on the ground or throw them up against a wall, you can then use the pieces, the insides of those, for all kinds of other purposes. So here is King County Correctional Guild President Dennis Folk.
Back during COVID, there was a plan to introduce tablets to the inmates that are in jail. We initially looked at it. We talked to some other jails, and they said that they didn't have a lot of issues with them. So we're like, okay, we'll be okay with this. But what we've realized over the last few years is that the jail is more concerned about giving inmates tablets so they can play games than they are with staff safety. And what I mean by that is that they're taking these tablets, they're breaking them, and break them into pieces. They're taking there's metal strips inside of it. There's glass pieces that they from the screen, and they're making weapons out of these. Like I said, I've been with the jail for 28 years. In the last few years, we've had more weapons found inside the jail than I've ever seen in my entire career. And just last Friday, Superior Court ordered a transport for a guy to go down to Western State Hospital. It was court ordered competency evaluations. This guy had to go down to Western. So we were arranging to transport that person down to Western State Hospital. Staff from the courts went up to pick him up. He was refusing to go, so they have to put a team together to go and get them. When they entered the cell, he was actively trying to stab them with one of these weapons that they made. And so he's coming over the top of basically a riot shield. He's trying to stab people. We're very fortunate in that incident that the officers, were trained. They're very capable, and they were able to get him quickly under control, and were able to prevent anything serious from happening. But then not 24 hours later, during a routine cell search, they find another weapon. And that was less than 24 hours after I went to management and said, hey, we've got to do something here. This has to stop. And what's happening is guy in custody will break the tablet and they'll immediately give him another one. And then they'll break it and they give him another one. And it's to us, it's like, this is crazy. One, are they being criminally charged for damaging property? Why are we continuing to give tablets to people that just want to break them and make weapons out of them? But I can't begin to understand the mindset of management and why they keep doing this.
So again, I was shocked to find out that some of these inmates intentionally destroying these tablets to use them for, as you heard, making shanks or use them for drug paraphernalia, that then can be issued another one. I was absolutely shocked, and I reached out to the King County Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention and received this response. We'll put this up for you. This was from Noah Hagelin, communications specialist with the Department of Adult and Juvenile Detention. He said, in part, correctional facilities throughout the country have long faced attempts by individuals in custody to fashion weapons from available materials. While the materials may change over time, our commitment to maintaining a safe and secure environment does not. The tablet program has provided important benefits. I was just mentioning some of those, including helping people in our custody stay connected with family, access to legal resources, and participate in educational programming. Like any item in a correctional setting, however, tablets can be misused. I did go back to Noah Hagelin with some additional follow-up questions. I want to know, so what happens to the guy who intentionally breaks his laptop? Why is he getting another one? And are there consequences for someone when they are intentionally, breaking one of these tablets and then misusing it? What happens to the guy who ends up with a shank found in his bedding when they search a cell? So I'm waiting for follow-up response. I gave him a deadline of this afternoon because my article is going to be published on the Center Square Washington page, and I really do hope that I get those responses in time. I will include that in my published article on our Center Square Washington page today. And finally, in today's episode, we have new data coming out from Hotel Financials related to the World Cup. It shows that Seattle, on average, actually sold fewer rooms during the World Cup this June and July than they did the same time last year. And my colleague Randy Diamond has an article up on our Center Square Washington page with a lot more information on this. I think he is the first to be reporting on some of these numbers. Turns out that occupancy during the games averaged between 60 and about 85%. That's down 7% for the month of June and 5.7% for the month of July compared to last year. But what hotel operators did was jack their rates up to make up for that a bit surrounding the World Cup, because of course you got people coming in, some of them last minute bookings when they, just decided to book one of the 6 games in Seattle. And so they were able to jack those rates up and still, make some money for those games. Now, you may recall that Seattle hotel operators were initially promised by FIFA, a couple years ago. You better, block out these rooms. You're going to need to have every available room during the games, leading up to and after. And so that's what they did. They blocked out, you know, certain percentages. And then as the games were nearing in those, like a month or so before, they were going, nobody's booked. We've still got all these empty hotel rooms. Well, the problem with that being normally June and July are really busy bookings for Seattle hotels for conventions, conferences coming into town. But they turned those people down and said, we can't accommodate you this year because we need to save these rooms for FIFA. Well, then when the World Cup games weren't coming, it was too late to lure back those folks that wanted to book for the conventions and the big conferences that they normally get. So that was kind of the bummer for them, because at that point it was too late to get those people back. So I found that to be pretty interesting. There were certainly benefits, and we're going to be getting more of those numbers in the weeks and months to come. And everybody that I talked to when I was there for the last Seattle match, which was a week ago Monday, everybody from out of town that I spoke to was pretty much raving about the city. I didn't see a lot of the homeless. We know they were kind of moved out of the Pioneer Square Stadium district so as not to be a blight on the city. We'll see if they end up moving back in. But pretty much everybody I talked to was loving the city. And that was good. I hope those people come back. But John Scholes, who is the executive director of the Seattle Downtown Association, spoke with my colleague Randy Diamond, and he said overall, World Cup was a big positive for the city.
We've been intentional about having a walkable downtown, intentional about creating a great waterfront, not rebuilding a highway, intentional about great transit, about having a stadium close to our downtown. And, all of those decisions, investments paid off and creating a really tremendous experience. And not just for people that had tickets to get inside Lumen Stadium, or folks that have never been here that were visiting from other places, but I think a great experience for locals, and a reminder of just, how much locals value downtown and want to take part in experiences here that they can't get in their own neighborhood. I mean, we all could have just stayed at home and watched all these matches on TV by ourselves or with a couple of friends, but people wanted to be in the middle of it all with lots of other people. They wanted to be where the vibes were, and that is in the core of their city. And so it's a big validation of all the things that we're working on today and have been working on for many, many decades.
So more than 3 million people visited the downtown Seattle area across those 6 World Cup match days that were hosted here. As I mentioned, I'm sure we're going to get more data in the weeks and months to come on some of the wins, some of the losses, some of the takeaways. And again, hopefully those people that visited, the ones I spoke to from Arizona, New Jersey, Texas, New York, just the ones that I was visiting with when I was downtown, all had wonderful things to say about the city. Everybody loved the waterfront, the views over at the Olympic Mountains, and it's a world-class city for sure. So hopefully those people will come back, and spend some more money here. So that's a wrap on today's episode of Washington in Focus Daily for this Friday. Going into what's going to be another beautiful weekend around here. Hopefully you'll get out and enjoy it. I hope to see you again on Monday. Thanks for watching.